good afternoon. It's 12 on 3FM 92.7. Welcome to the bulletin. Coming up this afternoon, Attorney General dismisses minorities' culture of silence claims under Mahama Government acts exaggerated. Meanwhile, Accra High Court adjourns hearing of bail application for Bono Regional NPP Chairman Abronye DC to Thursday, May 21. Also in the bulletin, Ghana's public debt hit 674.1 billion cedis in March 2026. This afternoon, we'll assess the impact on the economy. And later in the bulletin, over 100 residents displaced as floodwaters submerge homes at Ohwim Tigo Junction in Kumasi. Details of this and more shortly. Stay with us. Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin the bulletin here. This is 3FM 92.7. The Accra High Court has adjourned hearing of a bail application filed by NPP Bono Regional Chairman Kwame Bafo, popularly known as Abronye, to Thursday, May 21, after prosecutors requested more time to file their response. Lawyers for Abronye, led by former Attorney General Godfred Yeboah-Adame, appeared in court seeking bail after the Accra High Court denied the Accra Circuit Court denied the application. Abronye has been charged with offensive conduct conducive to the breach of peace and publication of false news. Prosecutors accuse him of making derogatory remarks about a judge and attempting to incite public dissatisfaction against the judiciary. His continued detention has triggered accusations from the minority of a growing culture of silence under the NDC government. Let's go on the line and speak to our legal affairs correspondent, Lord Edward Sare. Lord, what exactly transpired in court today regarding the bail application and the prosecution's request for adjournment?
Right, Grace, you'd recall that Abronye has been in incarceration since the 13th of May. Now, in court today, his lawyers, led by the former Attorney General Godfred Yeboah-Adame, prayed. We're hoping to move a motion for his bail, having earlier been denied by a circuit court. Now, a state attorney representing the prosecution indicated that she had had an advice from the Attorney General to seek a short adjournment for them to be able to respond appropriately to the service the documents which had been served by the defense. Now, Godfred Yeboah-Adame indicated that this shouldn't be anything which should be dragged because they are only going to application, and so that can be done immediately. But then the state attorney indicated that the Attorney General needed to familiarize himself with the investigators and essentially the case involving Abronye, for which reason they were seeking the short adjournment. But again, Godfred Yeboah-Adame made a point that they served the prosecution with the documents about 6 days ago, and so they didn't know the reason why they have still not responded to their documentation. And so after listening to the argument, the presiding judge gave a brief adjournment, basically an agenda hearing to tomorrow. So we'll be back in court tomorrow. And Grace, something to add to it is that Abronye himself was absent in court. He did not show up, and that was a key moment where Godfred Yeboah-Adame indicated that his health is being endangered, for which reason they were hoping that the court will be able to grant him that bail. And so we're back in court tomorrow to see how things will pan out. But some lawyers of Abronye have been speaking to us. We had the General Secretary of the NPP speaking about the issue, as well as the former Deputy General Secretary Nana Obribwahing. We can listen to them now.
Right, we have Justin Frimpong here.
As you are aware, our party, led by the Council for our chairman Abronye, Kojo Nkrumah, filed for bail application, which the Attorney General was duly served, and today was fixed for the hearing of the bail application. Indeed, we knew and we were told that per the electronic allocation, the case was to be heard at the Criminal Court 2. So this morning, we went to the criminal court too. After some few minutes, our lawyer, Ohwim Tigo, told us that, surprisingly, the case has been moved from where officially it was allocated to a different court. It was an error. How can electronic allocation of a case be an error? And in correcting it, the registrar manually decided to move it to a different court. But however, guided by the principle of due process, our lawyer and the team moved to the new court, which is the General Jurisdiction Court 2, Court 3. And our application was moved. But however, the Attorney General's office opposed to the application. In fact, they rather said that they wanted the case to be adjourned so that they can study the procedure to be in the position to advise, which our counsel objected to it. That since you have been served 6 clear days, definitely they must have read the proceedings and be in the position to respond. Her ladyship decided to take a short break to reverse.
So that was Justin Frimpong Kodua, General Secretary of the New Patriotic Party and also one of the lawyers for Abronye DCE. Away from that, residents of Ohwim Tigo Junction in the Bantama sub-metro of the Ashanti region are counting their losses after a heavy overnight downpour displaced more than 100 people and submerged over 30 homes. The flooding, which followed hours of continuous rainfall, forced families to flee for safety as water levels rose rapidly through the community. What began as an evening rainfall quickly turned into a night of fear and destruction for residents of Ohwim Tigo Junction. Floodwaters swept through the community after several hours of heavy rain, invading homes and destroying personal belongings. And if you log on to our Facebook page as well as the other social media platforms, you see pictures and visuals of how devastating the rainstorm situation was at Ohwim Tigo Junction and why residents there are already calling for help. Let's bring in our Ashanti regional correspondent, Ibrahim Abubakar. He's been to the community this morning. Ibrahim, 100 people and over 30 submerged homes. This is devastating. Talk to us about what you found.
Yes, indeed. It has been a very difficult situation here at Ohwim Tigo Junction. And residents say the rain started around 5 p.m. But then the flooding became severe later in the night when water levels suddenly rose and entered their home. Now, many families yesterday were caught off guard and had to flee for safety, whilst others even had to spend the night on ceilings and in neighboring houses to avoid being swept away by the flood waters. Because you get to the area, you see that the flood had even moved beyond the window level, almost touching the ceiling level, which tells you the extent of flooding in the area. And when we visited the area earlier today, several residents were seen even trying to see whether they'll be able to salvage some of their personal belongings. But many of the victims say they've lost virtually everything and currently have no safe place to stay. In fact, there is a growing fear among the residents anytime it begins to rain, because they say flooding has become a recurring problem in the community. Now, most of them have built along or even on waterways, and the stream that is very, very close to the area is also heavily silted. So anytime it rains, then the water pour into their various homes. And yesterday was quite a devastating scene for residents around that area.
We can listen to some of the victims and what they've been telling you.
I was washing, so I went to go and get another water so I can rinse it. So I was still on the way drawing the water when I heard like it sounded like a volcano. I was like, where is it coming from? So as I was approaching my doorstep here, the erosion has already covered from this place. So before I entered, the rain has already entered here and spoiled everything, all the gadgets in the house, including my phone and everything. So I wasn't able to take anything off because as I was going, the thing was fast covering my neck. So I had to run away, and I jumped and I hung on that fence.
Ibrahim, we know that the National Disaster Management Organization, NADMO, has begun preliminary assessment in the area. What more do we know?
Well, exactly. So the preliminary findings by NADMO suggest that many of the structures in that area were built along and behind waterways. And these structures are obstructing the natural flow of water and even in worsening flooding situation in the area, day in, day out. So the Bantama Sub-Metro Director who visited there says they are just trying to see what they can do to help these residents. However, they are also advising residents living in flood-prone areas to remain alert during heavy rains and should quickly move to safer locations, especially when water levels begin to rise. Because with the onset of the rain, they said the meteorological service have informed them that the heavy rains are yet to come, and for that matter, people who are living around these areas should move to safe areas and ensure that the flood waters does not sweep them away. However, they say they will also try to see whether they will be able to get something to compensate some of these residents and ensure that the life is restored back to normalcy for them.
Right, let's listen to the NADMO Ashanti Regional Officer.
People are not supposed to board here. So we don't know whether they got permits, how they came to stay. I don't know. So I will recommend, my assessment is that they shouldn't allow people to build around nature reserve. We are entering the rain season, so it's not safe for them to stay here. So we recommend that they find a place to stay.
So that was the NADMO Ashanti Regional Head. Earlier we spoke to Ashanti Regional Correspondent Ibrahim Abubakar. Let's come back to the Greater Accra region, specifically the Attorney General's Office, and the AG and Minister for Justice, Dr. Dominic Ayine, says he will treat with contempt threats by the opposition New Patriotic Party to make the country ungovernable over alleged intimidation of its members, insisting that the party is exaggerating concerns surrounding free speech and political tolerance. His remarks come a day after the NPP minority petitioned the diplomatic community, calling on the international community to reaffirm the importance of freedom of expression, judicial independence, and political tolerance in Ghana's democratic dispensation. Responding to the concerns, Dr. Ayine maintained that while freedom of speech is guaranteed under Ghana's democratic framework, it comes with limitations and responsibilities. Let's listen to him.
I think that the minority is exaggerating a lot with respect to the question of gagging of free speech. All right, there are limits. If you look at the Constitution, Chapter 5 of the Constitution deals with the fundamental human rights and freedoms. Look at Article 21, which guarantees the fundamental, a right to free speech, to the right to demonstrate, okay, and then the general freedoms of Ghanaians. But there are limits, all right? You can limit free speech if, for instance, it is something that, one that can undermine public order, all right? Our public morals, okay, and for instance, for law enforcement reasons. So, if someone, for instance, is inciting hatred in our society, okay, we do not expect that the minority will say that we should sit down idle as a government and allow that person to, to go on.
You had the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. The AG said more on related matters. Christian Yale is our correspondent who had this engagement with him. Christian, who is the AG citing for contempt?
Yes, Grace. We know that yesterday the NPP's youth organizer, Salam Mustafa, had made those remarks that if they are pushed further, they would not hesitate from weaponizing all the youth of the NPP to fight against what government is doing, which they see as gagging consent or dissent, rather. And also, from all the indicators we've had, you realize that from one press conference to another engagement, we see the minority leader raise concerns, and even on his social media walls, descended heavily on the judge presiding over the Abronye case, for instance, that the judge is not being fair and not following procedural law, as it were. And so the AG responds to that and makes the case that for those threats that they would weaponize themselves or arm themselves and make the country ungovernable, he would treat that with all the contempt that it deserves. We can listen to him say that.
Well, one thing they say is that you are attempting to reintroduce the criminal libel law, and that if this continues, they would arm themselves and make the country ungovernable. Well,
As for the threat of arming themselves and making the country ungovernable, I think I will, treat it with the contempt it deserves. Okay, but as far as this government is concerned, I want to reiterate that we will respect the rights and freedoms of every Ghanaian.
Right, Christian, we know a question was asked about oral. Where are we with that corruption fight?
He says it is ongoing and it will succeed, unlike claims by the minority that government is deliberately diverting attention from the oral and rather persecuting members of the opposition. He says that NPP rather is afraid for the acts of corruption in the past because all the cases in court are rather putting pressure on them. We can again listen to the AG.
When, statements like that are being made, that we are doing this because oral is failing. Oral is not failing. All right? Go back and check the records. I am the first Attorney General in the history of the Fourth Republic to have brought 5 corruption cases in 1 year. Go back and check the records. And what is happening in court now is rather putting pressure on them because they know that I have been so diligent in my investigations, I have been so diligent in the prosecutions that they are afraid that their people will go to jail for, the acts of corruption that they engage in. And
that was the Minister for Justice, Dr. Dominic Ayeni. Earlier, we spoke to my colleague Christian Yale, who is following that Public Account Committee sitting. This is the Midday News on 3FM 92.7. Let me take you up north this afternoon. And traditional authorities in Saboba and Tripoli are making a passionate appeal to the NDC Chairman Johnson Esiedun Ketia to ensure that job opportunities are available for the youth in rural constituencies. According to them, human development is critical in achieving overall community development. They made the appeal when the NDC chair paid courtesy calls on them at their palaces. Let's now engage my colleague Christopher Macon. Christopher, what else have the chiefs been saying?
So the chiefs have also been calling for some road infrastructure, because if you look at the Yendi Saboba Road, Saboba Chirponi Road, and other linking roads, they are in a very deplorable state. Even though these roads have been on contract over the years, but they are yet to see the light of day when we talk about finishing with the contract. And so the people are saying that it makes transportation of their food products very difficult, because if you look at these areas, they are farming communities, and so they believe that after the year-round farming, they will have to transport their food to other places where they can get market. And so they have also been calling for some job opportunities for the youth in these areas. Let's take a listen to the paramount chief of the Saboba traditional area.
And our request that they should help us to fix some of our children in their government. They didn't turn it down. We are very grateful to them for the appointment of the transport minister, Honorable Joseph Bukari Nupe, whom I know is serving in its full capacity by appointing Adolf Ali as the Northern Regional Minister, enjoying some relative peace. And we are also seeing a lot of developmental projects going on.
Right, Christopher, what has been the response from the NDC Chair, Johnson Asiedu Nketia?
Yes, so the NDC chairman has indicated to the traditional authorities and other party supporters that the NDC government is not leaving anyone behind. The NDC government believes that the people who gave them the mandate should see the needed development, whether human or capital. And so at the appropriate time, those who are yet to benefit from the good governance of the NDC will get it, and that they cannot employ everyone at the same time, but it's gradual. And so the chiefs and people should exercise some level of patience as they work towards making lives better for every Ghanaian. Let's take a listen to the NDC chairman.
And I'm delighted to also report that when we came here the other time, the chief pleaded that whatever government that we will be forming after the elections, we should make sure that Saboba is properly represented. I'm happy to inform the chief that even before the victory, I invited my brother, third degree Moses Mabemba, to join our elders.
That was the NDC Chair, Johnson Asiedu Nketia. Earlier, we spoke to Savannah Regional Correspondent Christopher Amoako. Let's talk about Ghana's economy and how our public debt is rising, because Ghana's public debt rose to 674.1 billion as of March 2026, equivalent to 42.2% of gross domestic product (GDP), driven by a combination of domestic borrowing, by cedi's depreciation against major currencies, and legacy obligations from previous years, according to the latest summary of economic and financial data released by the Bank of Ghana. The debt stock, which stood at 641.1 billion at the end of December 2025, increased by 33 billion in the first 3 months of 2026 alone. The cedi's depreciation of 8.4% against the US dollar between January and May 2026 has contributed significantly to the increase in the cedi value of external debt, even when the underlying US dollar denominated obligations remained relatively stable. Well, that's a lot of figures. Let's bring in Professor Patrick Esumin. He's an economist and academic at the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, thank you for your time this afternoon. We know that the Monetary Policy Committee is meeting today at a time where inflation has dropped dramatically from over 21% to just 3.4%, while interest rates are also falling. Can we say this is enough evidence for Ghana's economy to be truly stabilized, or are there still hidden risks beneath all these numbers?
Good afternoon to listeners. Thanks for having me. Yes, I think definitely the economy has absolutely reached a stability phase. We should be in a phase of recovery. So I think the macro numbers are looking great, but I'm sure within the period we've also seen this week there's been a report from the Ghana Statistical Service about multidimensional poverty, and we've seen other reports about food vulnerability to food risk. So I think the macro phase has stabilized and somewhat doing well, but it needs to go on for a while. But more importantly, we need to build on the macro phase to ensure that the real economy is also progressing, and not just that we are seeing growth, but we are seeing growth that is translating into jobs. I think that is the aspect that we really need to focus on. But in terms of the macro numbers, even with the increase in debt, you should understand that the debt to GDP ratio is still relatively low, and our debt servicing obligations are much, much lower.
Yes. So, Doc, we are seeing stronger reserves, a stable CD, and a booming stock market. Yet, many ordinary Ghanaians will ask you, how does that translate into my cost of living or my pocket? Why are citizens not fully feeling the impact of these positive indicators yet?
So, there are a number of reasons. One is that, you really need to see these improvements sustained for a long period. Now, because of where the economy has come from, and because this kind of improvement has been before, we really need to see it continue for a long time. Then businesses begin to respond by expanding their activities and employing more people. Then you begin to see these things translate. We cannot expect that it is automatic, that the moment you see this kind of stability for a year and a half, then suddenly everything is come down. Right. It also requires deliberate investment so that the government decides that we are going to make growth more job creating. So at the moment, even though the growth is strong, it is not really, we are not really creating jobs. It's mostly been jobless growth.
Okay.
So I think it requires specific strategies by the government. There are some aspects of this improvement that you readily see translating into the marketplace.
Okay, Doc, so we'll have a lengthier conversation on this, but before I let you go, briefly for me, we know the MPC is meeting. If you are to advise the governor, would you advise him or tell him to maintain the policy rate at 14%?
That's probably what I'll advise him to do.
To maintain
the risk from the geopolitics is beginning to kick in. So far, the economy has managed it well, but I think we need to see how it plays out before we begin to resume any attempt to reduce the policy rate further. So it seems like, based on the balance of the information that has been released, staying the interest rate looks like the right thing to do at the moment.
Okay, Prof, thank you so much for talking to us. We'll come back to you subsequently for a lengthier conversation on this. Professor Patrick Esumin is an economist and academic at the University of Ghana Business School. This is the Midday News on 3FM 92.7. Before we take leave of you, government has announced a support package for Ghanaians being evacuated from South Africa following ongoing xenophobic attacks targeting foreign nationals. In a notice issued Wednesday morning, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said affected Ghanaians will receive a welcome home financial package, transportation support, and a reintegration allowance to help them rebuild their lives upon return. The ministry also says free psychosocial support services will be provided for evacuees dealing with trauma from the attacks. Government further disclosed that returnees will be enrolled into a special database to connect them with job opportunities and startup support programs. Meanwhile, the first batch of 300 Ghanaians in South Africa is expected to arrive in Ghana on Thursday, May 21, aboard a special chartered flight. And so if you have a relative there, you're sure you're going to meet them tomorrow. But that is it for the Midday News on 3FM 92.7. It came to you live from our studios here at Adesawe Kanda, Accra. My name is Grace Hammoah Agyemang. Log on to 3news.com and get some more stories. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Business Daily on 3FM 92.7 with me, Bismarck. Also coming up, Bank of Ghana faces high-stakes policy rate decision today as falling inflation, stronger cedi, and global oil price shocks dominate 130th MPC meeting.
So far, early indications point to a re-acceleration of headline inflation in several advanced and emerging market economies, prompting several central banks that have commenced easing cycles to pause.
Meanwhile, Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry (GNCCI) pushes for at least 100 basis point cut to sustain economic recovery and ease cost of credit for businesses. We'll hear from its chief executive, Mark Bedu-Abuaje.
I would have loved that they reduce the policy rate to a lower level. At least 1 percentage point should be fine, so that we sustain the reduction in the policy rate and the reduction in the lending rate as well.
Plus, Dubai Chamber leads 19 company trade mission to Accra as Ghana-Dubai non-oil trade surges 60% to 39.6 billion dirhams. We'll bring you details of our headlines and other stories shortly. Please stay. Thanks for your company. Now to the details. The Bank of Ghana is expected to unveil its latest policy rate decision later today as members of the Monetary Policy Committee conclude deliberations on whether easing inflation and improved foreign exchange stability are enough to justify another rate cut. This is despite mounting global oil price shocks and geopolitical uncertainties. There is more in the following 3 Business News Desk report. The monetary policy decision comes at a time when Ghana's macroeconomic indicators continue to show signs of improvement, with inflation falling sharply in recent months, the cedi remaining relatively stable, and the country recording strong reserve growth and an improved current account position. The current policy rate stands at 14%, while inflation is hovering around 3.4%, raising expectations among some analysts for a possible further cut to support private sector credit and economic growth. However, the central bank is also facing renewed risks from rising global energy prices and escalating tensions in the Middle East, which Governor Dr. Johnson Esiama says could put pressure on inflation and Ghana's foreign exchange reserves.
So far, early indications point to a re-acceleration of headline inflation in several advanced and emerging market economies, prompting several central banks that had commenced easing cycles to pause or even to reverse course. So for a commodity exporting, energy importing economy such as ours, Ghana, the transmission channels of this external shock are multiple and material.
The Monetary Policy Committee is expected to balance these competing risks as it announces its latest rate decision later today, a move closely watched by investors, businesses, and the financial markets. And that was a 3 Business News Desk report on the Bank of Ghana facing high-stakes policy rate decision today after concluding its 130th MPC meeting. Meanwhile, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry says it expects at least a 100 basis point cut in the policy rate. The chamber says despite the impact of global developments on Ghana's economy, a reduction in the policy rate is critical to sustaining the gains made in the economy. Speaking on the sidelines of the launch of the chamber's 6th Chamber Business Awards, Chief Executive of the Chamber, Mark Bedu-Abuaje, expressed optimism that the committee would deliver a favorable outcome.
As businesses, we have been complaining about high lending costs. So our focus has been a reduction in policy rates, looking at what is happening in the economy with inflation coming down. But looking at the moment, I mean, there are a lot of risks that are around. We've seen an inflation also going up. We've seen the war, the Iran and the American war pushing oil prices up and also affecting export prices. So the risk is very obvious. I would have loved that they reduce the policy rate to a lower level. At least 1 percentage point should be fine, so that we sustain the reduction in the policy rate and the reduction in the lending rate as well. But I think we have very competent committee members. They will look at what is happening. They will assess the economy, look at all the variables, and I'm sure that they will come out with a policy rate that will be sustainable for businesses.
Amid all of this,
and that was Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, GNCCI's Mark Beju Abuaje. Away from that, Ghana's trade and investment ties with the United Arab Emirates have received a fresh push as the Dubai Chamber of Commerce led a 19-company business delegation to Accra under its New Horizons initiative. This is aimed at expanding Dubai-based firms into high-growth markets. There is more in the following report. The delegation brought together companies operating across automotive, construction, engineering, food and beverages, pharmaceuticals, mining, textiles and logistics. As part of the visit, bilateral business meetings were held with Ghanaian firms alongside the Dubai-Ghana Business Connect Forum, co-organized with the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. Officials say the engagement reflects growing economic ties between the two markets, with non-oil trade reaching 39.6 billion dirhams in 2025, representing a 60.1% increase year-on-year. The chamber also notes that over 200 Ghanaian companies are now active members, highlighting rising private sector integration. The mission is expected to pave the way for deeper commercial partnerships between Ghana and Dubai, particularly in manufacturing, infrastructure, logistics and investment facilitation, as both sides position themselves for stronger cross-border trade growth. This is still Business Daily on 3FM 92.7 with me, Bismarck. Also, before we go, experts say Ghana must urgently embed procurement at the center of national planning as global shocks and geopolitical tensions continue to expose supply chain vulnerabilities. Procurement and supply chains face mounting pressure from economic uncertainty, environmental risks, and market disruptions. There is more in the following report. The call was made at the Great Conversation, organized by the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, CIPS, bringing together industry leaders and policymakers to chart a path for more resilient and transparent procurement systems in Ghana. Global CEO of the Institute, Ben Farrell, says procurement reform is critical to strengthening governance and attracting investment, adding that his outfit will be engaging Finance Minister Dr. Kasiel Atuforsen on ways to deepen reforms and improve supply chain efficiency.
I think there's a massive opportunity here to drive procurement best practice and economic growth as well. So I will be talking, I think this afternoon, to the Finance Minister about what we're doing elsewhere in the world to really drive opportunities to think about inwards investment, economic growth, as well as rooting out corruption in any procurement process.
General Manager of the West African branch of CIPS, Stella Adu, says procurement in Ghana must be integrated into national planning.
Procurement should be at the forefront. Procurement should, move around with everybody, all the stakeholders to plan so that we are able to give value to where it is necessary, especially because procurement are custodians of the budgets, the government budgets, and we are the people who spend.
The discussions come as Ghana intensifies efforts to reform public procurement systems to improve transparency, efficiency, and economic resilience amid ongoing global uncertainty. And that brings us to the end of Business Daily on 3FM 92.7 with me, Bismarck. Also, for more business stories, please check out our website 3news.com. Thanks for your company.